You're listening to the Business Club for Grown-Ups podcast with Jessica Fernley. Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Business Club for Grown-Ups podcast. I'm really pleased today to be joined by my special guest, Emily Hodge. Emily, thank you so much for being with us.
I like being a special guest. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very special privilege. So Emily, tell us who you are and what you do, first of all.
My name is Emily Hodge. I am a coach, Jessica, and I help people to lead more gentle lives. And that's come about from lots of twists and turns in my own life in not being so gentle, and also from understanding, seeing the world as it is today and realising, as I'm sure you'll recognise, how busy, stressed, overwhelmed, pressured, all the other words that come up when you think about not leading a gentle life, that we all feel. And hearing all of those things from different people, my clients, my colleagues, myself, my friends, my family, I began to see that there could be a way that we could try and combat this. I say combat, that's definitely not the right word, in the sense of it's a very behaviour change program that allows you to understand where you can be more gentle. So that's what I do, and that's partly how it works.
Excellent. And can you tell us a little bit about how gentle living became something that you wanted to have at the centre of your business, really? Because you've got a really interesting, a really fascinating, but just such a powerful story of how this all came about, haven't you?
I guess you could say powerful. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Sure, it's essentially the gentle living concept was born actually almost a year ago to the day. I found some notes the other day that had me writing up the course, which is really exciting. But it had been something I'd been leaning towards for a good few years. And it may not have been so much this idea of gentle, but it certainly was this idea of self-compassion, of bringing calm where there isn't calm, feeling like you are rooted and centered and a bit more in control even when the world around you is shaky, or you feel shaky in your environment or your situation. So it actually feels like it's been a long, lovely journey to get to that point of creating what is the gentle life concept. Really, originally, I would say the turning point was about 8 years ago when I was diagnosed with cancer. I just got married to my now husband, and we were about to really start the life that we were going to be having. We were very excited, as you are when you're newlyweds. And then 3 months later, I had a cancer diagnosis. And what that did was it just flipped me into a whole other world. It flipped me into an illness world that you don't really expect to be in at 30. And through the course of, treatments, surgeries, lots of unknowns, very scared moments, I began to see that there was a way that I could cope and manage with this that I wasn't currently doing. Because, we usually do know people who've had cancer in our peer group. We usually do know it's not that uncommon, unfortunately to say. And I think the image you get of a cancer patient is this serene person who is managing and fighting. And I'm perfectly happy to admit I was not that person. I was super angry. I was very frustrated. I felt like I shouldn't have been there. And I was not a great patient. And what that meant was I pushed and I struggled a lot in the 2 or 3 years that I was in treatment and in surgeries and things. Looking back, of course, and kind of being objective about it, you can absolutely see why. There's no reason why somebody wouldn't have found that hard and felt like their life was kind of changing around them. But what I realised as I started to come out of it a good few years later, so it wasn't overnight, and it wasn't just some transformation that I read a book and I felt fine again. This took a long time for me to say, there must be another way for me to manage these feelings and these difficulties and the stress that it is putting on me and my body and my family and my friends and my work, for example.
And
well,
really, that's quite an interesting point, actually, isn't it? Because I think so often people now talk about cancer as like, come on, let's beat cancer. You got to think positively. You got to get through this. And
I'm sorry to say, but I'm sorry, but
yeah, there are some majorly negative things that come through that, and cancer is a horrible, horrible thing, isn't it? Actually, and as an illness, it's terrible. The treatment is such a big thing to go through, and it's almost, what do we do with these negative feelings that come up? Because exactly like you're saying, when something like that happens to you or someone in your family, it's not this like, oh yeah, everyone, let's just stay really positive. Like, there's some really hard, dark times, aren't there? And you can't just kind of smile your way out of it. Sometimes you need to have an avenue for that reality, you know, that the fact that sometimes life just really kicks you when you're down, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's so interesting for me to reflect on this even now, and I find new things in my reflection even now, because there's things I've forgotten, or I was too drugged out, you know, because I was in pain to know what I was doing, and now I'll get these kind of images of, oh, that happened, oh yes, that conversation, but they all come back to this idea of you being on your own, awful word, but journey in your own illness. And look, if I took the word cancer out here, anybody listening, you could replace it with anything slightly difficult that you might be going through. I don't mean to say it's exactly the same. I just mean, if you think about the pathway of struggles and difficulties and pain and sadness and grief and all those things, they are quite similar in the way that you experience it. You know, we all want to generally be happy and content and calm and resilient to the things around us. And when life isn't how you would like it to be, it pushes you to the absolute limit. And I think that I can see now, I was just pushed and pushed and pushed again and again. And I say that because we kept having bad news. And I say bad news, I'm alive, right? So people think, you're alive, you look so well. Tilted head, how are you? But it's almost like a struggle to try and communicate in the right way and appropriately. Yes, you're alive, I'm grateful to be alive, but it is tough to be alive after all of that, because for most people their bodies have been changed quite significantly. Most people have had to make big decisions or lost things, you know, careers have changed, partners might have left them. I know I'm making it sound a bit depressing, but it's actually the reality.
Yeah, I don't think that's depressing. I think that's really important to acknowledge. And actually, there can be a mismatch, can't there, between what we're going through and how we feel and what other people are ready to hear from us. And so it's finding that way to communicate the reality of how you're actually doing without kind of making that awkward pause in the conversation where someone just wants you to go, do you know what? I fought cancer, I kicked its butt, and I am perfect. Because it's not that, nothing is ever that simple, is it?
I absolutely applaud the people who can do that and can feel it. What I mean is feel it genuinely in their heart, and that's what they've done. Unbelievable, amazing. It wasn't my personal journey. It's not the journey of many people I know. Doesn't mean that anyone's journey is wrong or right. It is just so different, and it's probably, you could probably liken it to motherhood, right? Everybody's experience of motherhood, their birth, the kind of mother that they are, or the way their children are, is so different, and there's a ton of judgment about what you should or shouldn't be doing. And it's the same in like the illness world. There's kind of this idea of, have you tried yoga? Have you done some meditation? In that way, you know, I love yoga and meditation, by the way. It's just when it's said in a certain way, which is, you'll be fixed if you do these things.
Yeah, exactly. And that's completely what it can feel like as a mum. I think you can feel like everyone else had an amazing experience, and you compare yourself, and you sometimes feel quite inadequate because you're like, oh, I didn't really like pregnancy. And birth, wouldn't do that every day. Not the funnest thing ever. Result, very, very wonderful, but like stitches, my goodness, you hurt in places you didn't even know you had.
I think that's exactly it. It's being able to, you know, coming back to your kind of original question, it's coming through those things. That's what life is about. And I remember it was actually my husband that said it a few years ago, and it was so stuck with me. I probably should have the phrase written somewhere, and it's definitely come from a book. But you know, he'd been reading a Buddhist philosophy book somewhere, and he had said, you know, actually what they say is really true. Life is actually about finding the joy outside of the difficult moments. It's not about aiming for peace and kindness and love all the time, because it's frankly impossible. It's finding peace even when you're going through something difficult. And that stuck with me so much. It feels so beautiful and so much easier to obtain, because it's like, wow, yeah, all I have to do is really get to a point where I appreciate stuff even when things are a struggle. And you know, you're a business coach, right? So if you bring this into the idea of business, it comes into that too. It's almost being able to say there's always ups and downs in life, in work, in business, in our relationships, in our families. They will always be there. And I feel like that's a really important way to look at life. I'm not trying to eradicate struggles. It's just saying, oh, I can sway with them. I can try and learn a way that I can be strong and centered even with them. And that's really what this whole journey has been about for me. And I'm fully able to admit I am not there in the sense that I'm centered and calm all the time. And I've even written a blog last week about how I'm not very gentle. But the reason for that is because I want this to be, it's that word of authenticity. There's no point in me going, I'm now a guru in this stuff, by the way, everyone, and you should all follow exactly what I do, because my philosophy is helping you to find the way that you would lead a more gentle life. And yes, for people who've been through struggles or difficulties, but people who just want to feel like they're in control or calmer, or just don't want to be so busy anymore.
Yeah, and I'm really aligned with your whole philosophy, really, and your message, Emily, because you know, I've been through nothing on the scale of what you've been through at all, but I've had that experience of just being like, right, well, I have a chronic illness. This is the path that I'm on. And I don't know, what I was hearing while you were talking is kind of this, almost this sense of this is your unique journey. And sometimes it's not the one that you choose, but actually there's something very life defining about having that isolating experience where it happens in your life and you can't control it, and you just have to find a way to work through it. But actually that process, that working through, it turns you into a completely different person almost, doesn't it? It gives you a strength that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
I have to say there's almost, and I've spoken to, I work with cancer patients now, so I know this to be true. There is almost slightly a little arrogance about it, because you're like, I've been through something massive. And you almost hold it with you, because it has been incredibly life-changing. And for many people, as I said, going back to something we talked about earlier, which is, it isn't about this, I'm so positive now, life is amazing. Actually, where that tends to come from is the people who do experience that feeling tend to be a lot older. And that's not to take away from an older person's experience of cancer being so much easier, but usually they have been through, they've maybe had their families, they've maybe retired, so they have a pension, they're maybe not looking to get a new job or move house. They tend to have life a little bit more developed than someone in their 20s, 30s and 40s. So I work with this age group in cancer, because I know that this age group, my age group, goes through lots of life changes as they're experiencing something when they're ill. And the people I do work with talk about, this is still a struggle. This isn't just coming through it and saying I'm better and I'm strong. This is going, there was one situation during the cancer, and now there's another situation after the cancer. So yeah, I should probably explain. I work in the cancer world as well as in this slightly more generous, gentle life world. And actually what's lovely is some of my cancer clients come into the Gentle Life course, and we all meld it together, because again, like I said, it's quite universal, this idea of seeking peace and calm and self-compassion, whatever you've been through.
Definitely. And it's really interesting to me how much the things that you've experienced and the things that on the cancer side of the work that you do, because I think you're being quite modest, Emily, because you have pioneered kind of cancer support coaching, haven't you? It's been something you've been really involved in setting up. And there's been a few different organisations that you've done that kind of in conjunction with, but really it's been something that you have done and have made a really big success of. But there's a lot that happens when people go through cancer that actually can be transferable to people who haven't experienced cancer. Can you tell us a bit more about that and about the kind of women who come onto the Gentle Life course with you?
Yeah, sure. There's some key groups actually that I suppose you could say ideal client, but however you want to frame it. I definitely work with quite a few mums. I'm not a mum myself, but actually I think the program itself is what kind of sells it in that way. It's the idea of being able to slightly have a bit more control in your day. And actually I remember I put a post up somewhere or something about, would you like to shout at your kids less? And I think that probably attracts quite a lot of mums. So that's definitely one group, because the idea of, yes, self-care, yes, being able to say I deserve and I need that time back for me, but it's also like relearning habits that maybe we get into that we don't even know that we've gotten into. So how do I communicate with my partner? How do I communicate with the kids? How do I feel about my sleep? How do I prioritize it? So there's a group of mums that I work with, which is really lovely. Another set of people I work with are usually people in the corporate world or sort of in their own work, and are feeling pretty tired and are feeling like they haven't quite got control over how they're balancing out their life. The idea that they are constantly going and going and going, and there doesn't seem to be this end in sight. And that really comes into this idea of, you know, the busy, glorification of busy, because a lot of us have been there, and a lot of us find ourselves sketching into it a little bit sometimes, don't we, pulling ourselves back from it, which is, I sort of just need to keep going because I think this is what I'm meant to do. And usually people will come to me at that stage when they're realizing their health is being compromised. So often I'll see people, they'll come onto the course and they've usually actually probably seen some kind of counsellor before, and you know, because this isn't a counselling course, it's definitely a coaching course. However, there is definitely a lovely beauty about it where we do enable people to feel safe to explore stuff that they might be going through. That's what I love about it. So those people might come and they're saying, I'm not sleeping very well, I'm really not eating all that well at the moment, I'm not looking after myself, my job is, I'm hating it at the moment. Those key factors that get us to want to seek out what we might want to change, you know, key parts in our lives. Often we might be arguing with a partner. That's quite a big trigger for coming on the course. So that's another group, which is slightly more corporate, I guess you could say.
And for me, that sounds really relatable. I mean, both do, because, yeah, I wish that I didn't shout at my kids. But I think what you're describing there just sounds like me before I went through burnout. I just remember having this feeling of like, I don't really know where the next stop on this destination is, but I just feel like the road is running out and I don't have enough energy to keep going. And yeah, potentially life would have been so different for me if I had known about your course, if you'd been running it back then.
I wish it was 8 years old, 10 years old, however.
But you know, I think if you've been through burnout already and you know that you're lacking certain skills, or you feel like you're going back down that path, or if you're not really sure what it's all adding up to, but you just have that sense of overwhelm and like I'm just not really coping, but I can't really talk to anyone about it, and I don't really know what I'm supposed to do because this doesn't really happen to people, except that it does. So what you're saying there, it almost perfectly describes me kind of a decade ago.
Well, actually, that's a really good point, because one of the biggest words that comes up again and again in this course, and I'm now in the 4th course, so it's run for 4 times, and a very key word that comes up is permission and acceptance. And the permission is about, I have permission to say, I'm not okay, I'm not coping, I am not all right with this. And that takes a lot, right? Because we tend to look at the people around us and go, they seem to be all right, they're coping with this. Let's use my example as just an example of cancer. Everyone else seems to be okay, like they're kind of managing, like, you know, doing this life after cancer thing. It's like, no, they're not really, actually. Yeah. And I don't want everyone to be not well. I just mean the reality is that most of us aren't. Most of us have anxious thoughts, worry about what people think of us, and are kind of struggling a little bit. So the more we can kind of allow ourselves to say, all right, it doesn't really matter anyway what anyone else is going through. I don't feel okay. I know my body isn't coping. I know my mind is running away with me. It's enough to make me want to take some action. And the acceptance part is going, okay, I accept I might need to surrender to some of this. And that takes a lot of doing, right? Most of us are doers. We want to find answers. We want to push for things. We want to not feel uncomfortable.
And it's like you said, just do yoga. That'll fix it. That'll make it go away. And it sometimes it's that simple, but often it isn't, is it?
No. And actually part of the course is helping people to see that it's not just about the behavior. So I don't prescribe that people do something every day for 6 weeks. I don't say go and do now morning pages and yoga and walk your dog, because everybody's life is different. So the whole idea is they create the version of their gentle life that they really want, this image, this idea, I get them to do a big visualization of it. And that's what they're aiming to. And my gentle life will be different to yours. It'll be different to Sandra down the road. It's also got to fit in with you. If you have a lifestyle that's different to mine, your gentle life is going to be different to mine, which is why I think it's a very useful course for a range of people. It's not just about saying, it's all for mums or it's all for business people. It's actually that beautiful range of saying, well, we'll all learn from each other because we're all going through slightly different things and have different solutions.
Yeah. And I love that it's not prescriptive, because I think we are all so individual and we all have different needs and different priorities, don't we? And so, exactly what you're saying, like for someone to say yoga really helped me, for someone that might be the one thing that makes the big difference, but someone else might need a completely different approach. And it's having that confidence and exactly what you're saying, that permission. That's such a powerful word for me as well. And I love that thing. For me, that's kind of what it means to really be a grown-up. It's just saying, I don't need to ask someone if I'm allowed to do this. I'm going to make a wise decision, but I'm going to do the thing that I need to do for myself, for my family, because actually it's not about looking around at the people around us and saying, well, they're not doing it, so I shouldn't either. It's about saying, well, actually, what is the right thing? What do I know is right? What do I know will help? Let's do that.
But I think the thing is, we make ourselves so busy with life that we don't sit back and ask ourselves that question, because frankly, asking ourselves that question is flipping scary. It's actually quite, we feel like we might not want to ask that question because it's going to bring about too much change.
And you need to get to a point where you're ready to kind of go, okay, no judgment, I'm going to do this. And people may not understand, and I'm okay with that. And when you're in a place of real stress or real strain and very vulnerable, then you can't always do that. Sometimes that needs to be a kind of something that you work towards, doesn't it?
Yeah. And
sorry, I stopped you talking about the third group of people that the course is right for.
Well, it's back to what I said earlier about that, because of the work that I've done in the cancer community, I still work in it, just in a slightly more in a way that I work with charities. And so my clients from that work do come into the course as well. And that's really covering what I said earlier about supporting them to lead a life after cancer that doesn't feel so pressured and overwhelmed. That they often, that as well is kind of, it's very easy to be led into this post-cancer life of, you've got to run 7 marathons now and earn £40,000 from Macmillan. Frankly, quite a lot of people are like, I just want to read a book and sit down. And feel worthy and feel like they've done something. So that's helping them to just relearn what's right for them in their post-cancer life. One thing I was going to say as well, you were saying about it's not just doing yoga. One of the key messages that I do love to impart is that in order to do the behaviours, the actions, the daily habits that we partake in that keep us well, healthy and happy, we can't just do them. We often have to have some kind of thought process behind why we're doing it and really engage with it. So we always say that the habit, behaviour and action that we do comes from our thoughts, feelings and emotions. So yes, the course, but generally this work comes from health psychology in figuring out what our thoughts, feelings and behaviours are behind the things that we do, think and say in order to get us to lead calmer, happier, more compassionate lives in the end. So that's really the crux of this work.
No, definitely. And I was really interested what you said, you just touched on it a few moments ago, Emily, but about this relationship between coaching and counselling. And I know you have a background in NHS psychology and you had a kind of professional career in that before you started doing your gentle life coaching. But if there are people listening to this who feel like, I know that something is wrong and I know that I need some help or support, but should I see a therapist? Should I see a coach? What would your advice be in that kind of situation?
Great question. I literally have just written a blog on this, so I can put the link to the blog in it anyway. But it's something that comes up all the time, because unless we actually, even when we know slightly the difference, we sometimes don't know which one we need. The best way that I describe it is that therapy, counselling, psychology support, and on the podcast you can't see my hand, but it's basically going in like one
drawing like a field. Yeah.
All of that side of support is generally where someone is getting support to look at things that have happened in their past and help them either come to terms with it or think about it differently, or not be so triggered by it. However, if you then flip to coaching, generally coaching, and there are many types of coaching, we know there's executive, business, life, health, on and on. Generally, coaching helps you to look forward. It takes the person as they are in the present, and it helps them to plan, get confidence, feel positive about massive changes or small changes they might be going through. It helps them to make those changes, or it helps them to plan those changes. That is my very watered down basic version. I say watered down and basic only because within that there'll be tons of discrepancy. So I love to know that if you get a good coach, they'll actually be able to help you go back a little bit as well. They may have training in doing that, or they may just have some skills where they can help you touch on things. So it's not like I do this and you're now going to mention something that happened in your past. Oh, we can't talk about that at all because that's not me. It's more like giving them the space to be able to say what they need. Also, a good counsellor, therapist, psychologist probably has some coaching skills in their toolbox, because they usually, when you've processed lots of stuff from the past, you usually want to kind of do something with it. So I always say a really good version is to look for a coach that's got some training in some therapy, or look for a therapist or counsellor or psychologist who also does a bit of coaching type stuff. If that's what you want, because then you're going to be able to do a few things with them rather than just say, I need to put you in this box and you can only talk about this, and that's all we're going to do. That would be my preference anyway. That's not going to be everyone's preference. It's just, if you don't know what you want, a good practitioner in the whole field will be able to tell you straight away. So I bet you, when you take on new clients, Jessica, I bet you have an induction call with them, and you talk to them, and you probably ask them great questions. I'm the same, and I will always ask in my induction form, I ask people if they've had any therapy or counselling, and that informs actually a lot of my work, because I want to be able to support them in a coaching capacity. But yes, I do have psychology training, so I'm able to also use techniques where they can feel comfortable in accessing some things that might have happened in their past that might be blocking them, stopping them from moving forward. Brilliant.
And what would you say to someone who felt a little bit apprehensive about maybe the group aspect of things? Because I know, so I had 4 years of therapy after I had burnout, and it was just such a helpful thing for me. And it was one-to-one. And I know at the time, I just remember my therapist saying, it might be really good for you to go into group therapy. And I was like, whoa, I can't do that. I can't let people see how much of a mess I am. And it felt like a real, when you're quite vulnerable, you don't always want to show that to other people. But what would you say to someone in that situation who might be listening and just thinking, I'd really like help, but what if other people on the course just think I'm too much of a mess? Or, can I show people that side of myself?
Yeah, really great question. And I think probably people do think it. I always offer an initial call with somebody anyway to see, is the course the right thing for them? Actually, do they need coaching right now? And is it that they would need some other kind of therapy or some other kind of support? So I'd always talk to them about it. But I would say when we're in the course, it is such a joyful place to be. And I'm saying that as the leader, right? So I'll probably try and get a participant to tell you this rather than me, but it feels like a very safe and joyful place. It's not where everyone divulges all their secrets because they feel like they have to. It's more like, oh, I realize I do this thing because I feel like now suddenly I understand what was going on there. It's a subtle difference, but it is a difference, and that's where it's quite safe. and you can feel like the group is in this non-judgmental space where everybody's going through the same thing. Everybody's trying to lead their gentle life, and there's very supportive, because everyone's saying, actually, I struggle with that too. I don't know how to do this either, or learning from someone else who's doing it. The course itself is structured. It's got weekly modules, so there's topics each week. So within the topics, people are having conversations about the various things that are going on for them. And I think that's what makes it safer as well, because it's not like somebody has to go and say, all this stuff happened to me, I can't do this. It's more, this week I'm struggling with this because I don't have help at home, and I think that's what I need, you know. The group environment becomes very powerful. And actually I developed the group because I was seeing individual clients this time last year and hearing the same things, which is wonderful. It's fine. They can tell me what they like. But it was like, this could be really interesting if I got these people together and allowed them to hear each other. And that's exactly what the course really was for. It was to say, I promise you're not alone. And lots of my other clients are saying the same thing. And now the course shows them that. And the same thing is really what I was talking about earlier around, I'm too busy, I don't know how to change, I'm stressed, I just want a quiet life, I just want to be able to sit down with my book, I just want to know that in 3 years' time I'll, feel better about myself or whatever. It's all of those lovely goals that we think are indulgent, that we think maybe aren't quite so important, because we think we should be aiming for money or success at work or successful kids at school, and yet when it comes right down to it, most of us generally just want contentment with the things that we have.
And that's really powerful. I think it's amazing, isn't it, how people can be in very different situations in their life, and maybe someone's at work, someone else is at home with kids, someone else is doing a mixture of the two, and actually they can feel exactly the same and have a lot of the same struggles. And there's something very powerful, isn't there, about just realizing that we are not alone in our situation, which we almost never are. There's always people out there who are going through what we're going through. So if people like the sound of that, where can they find out more about the course? I can put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, it's on my website, so it's coachingemily.com, and then /how to lead a gentle life. But that I'll put the URL in there for you so that it's not so long. You have to type all that in.
Excellent. No, that sounds really good. We'll definitely make sure that goes into the show notes. And that's not the only thing that we have for you today, is it, Emily? Because we have done a very exciting collaboration this very month in the Business Club for Grown-Ups, which is my membership group, which has just launched. It sits behind this podcast, so it's for people who would like help with their business, who maybe feel like they're not ready to work with a business coach like me one-to-one, but they just really like expert help and support. We have me and my wonderful panel of expert friends and contacts who are coming into the Business Club for Grown-Ups and giving their real expertise and wisdom, and really helping people not make the mistakes that we made ourselves, isn't it, Emily? A lot of these things have been learned the hard way by all of us, and so we're sharing our knowledge so that people who are just starting out their business, or are just in that place where they know that they need help, they just don't fall into the same traps that we did. And Emily's done a very wonderful workshop for us called How to Digitally Detox and Still Work and Connect Online. And you can access that by joining up to the Business Club for Grown-Ups membership group. And there'll be a link to tell you how to do that in the show notes as well. But that was a wonderful thing. I was your guinea pig for that, wasn't I, Emily? And so we've shared our mistakes that we've made with just being too dependent on devices, and sort of almost using those devices to drown out the world around us sometimes, and disappearing into work, how to kind of still do the things that we need to do, but not have that kind of falling down the rabbit hole experience where you just feel like you're not engaging with your family, you're not enjoying stuff outside of work in the way that you used to. Whether you work or not is a wonderful thing to just be aware of, because I think devices are so powerful and so enticing these days, aren't they? And we all have them.
I developed it literally because it's part of the Gentle Life course, and it's really a very powerful standalone part of it, because I also just was hearing so many people talk about, I'm on Instagram too much, I let it rule my day, the anxiety I feel when I open up Facebook. It was like, this can't be okay. And it's not uncommon, we're reading so much more about our worlds online, and kids particularly, where the research is there. So that is just a really lovely part of how to lead a more gentle life, how to be less dependent on our digital lives in order for us to feel calm, happy, content with where we're at.
Yeah, and I have to say, so we recorded that session last week for the business club, but it's been the first time in a while, actually. This weekend I deleted the Facebook app off my phone. I was completely offline for, I think, 48 hours, which is almost unheard of. And certainly if you listen to the workshop, I confess how much time I was spending online before that. So it's really been powerful. Just in the space of a few days, I'm so much more aware of what I'm doing. And I already knew that I needed to change, and lots of things I'd put in place to make sure that I wasn't in that crisis point. But we can always just get that little bit better, can't we? We can always take another step and make sure that we're present in our lives. We're not just disappearing into our devices. So I found it personally, even as someone who was like happy to write an article on all the things I'd already put in place, I just found your advice so helpful for taking that one step further.
I think it's the numbers, isn't it? I know what you're referring to. It's the numbers.
Yeah, it's definitely the numbers, and I'm not saying here what it was. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Emily, for joining me today. It's been great just hearing about your journey and the way that you've developed your business, the way you've developed the Gentle Life course, just to pass on those skills that you've picked up yourself. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Pleasure. Lovely to see you, hear you.
Brilliant. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and I'll see you next time. You've been listening to the Business Club for Grown-Ups podcast with Jessica Fernley. To find out more, visit thebusinessclubforgrownups.com.